Well, we've had a break in the rain today. Should last for another day or two, hopefully, and then it's supposed to rain a lot next week again. But there's the little round head pullet in with the Whitehackle cock. I'm sure some of you have been anxious to see what bird I decided to put with her, and I chose my oldest Morgan cock because he's also one of the largest. I'm breeding him to this round head pullet and to this Morgan hen, and then I'm also breeding this Morgan stag back to his mom, and then I'm breeding this pair of Morgans and this pair of Morgans. And when I get that muff hen up here, I'm probably going to breed this stag to her. Not sure 100% yet. And then over here, I've got my 3 gull crosses. So I'm bouncing a rooster back and forth. And then over here, you're not going to be able to see it too well, but I've got 2 hens in that pen and a hen in a stag pen, and I'm running that Morgan cock over all 3 of those hens. So I accidentally hit the stop button when I was talking about the brood pens earlier. I moved the stag pens here. I got the 2 brassy back stags from last year still. I got them 2 red cocks that one is potentially spoken for, possibly both of them. If that changes, I will let people know, but I wanted to let people in on a little bit of history on the Whitehackle. There was some discussion today on a forum where a guy was asking what color of legs do Whitehackles have. And universally, it doesn't matter what family of Whitehackle you're talking about. The answer is almost always either white or yellow or both. And for the record of the 2 brassy backs, I like that one better. But unfortunately, both of them are duck-footed, so that kind of sucks. But anyhow, so your Morgan Whitehackle started off as Gilkerson Whitehackles. Now, the Gilkerson Whitehackle came from England, I want to say about the 1840s. And they were developed as a 3-way cross set as a family that involved light reds, like what the Earl of Derby had, so your partridge bred light reds, and I want to say some pyles, and some brown reds. I should have filmed this earlier when the sun was from the east. Oh well. But anyhow, George Gilkerson had them. And then when the time came for him to pass the torch, Mr. Morgan got them. And the way he bred them was he was real particular, and there's only 2 outcrosses that he ever claimed to have made into those Gilkersons. Now, one hen come from right across the Scottish border and was imported into the U.S. And it was never said what she was specifically, but given the information that Morgan had, he was pretty sure that she was the same exact blood as what he was already breeding, just from a farm in Scotland. Now, the other one that's of rather interest to some folks is a Newbold Ginger hen. And he bred that down to a very small percentage before he introduced it into his main flock. Now, ginger is an English term for what we call red quill in the United States. And I'm a little rusty on my history, but if I remember correctly... Oh, by the way, this brood cock here is a full brother to the 2 I'm selling. But anyhow, this Newbold Ginger, it's the same pattern as what we call red quill in the United States. And I may be mistaken, but if I remember correctly, the Newbold Gingers were developed using Estlin red quills that were sent to England. So there are reports that early on Morgan had some cocks in his bloodline after that influence of the ginger blood that came green-legged. And the discussion on the forum this morning was, so the guy was saying on the forum that the only kind of real authentic Morgans were always white-legged, red-eyed, and spangled. Now, genetically speaking, first off, the old game strain history books say the Gilkerson birds were white and yellow-legged both. Now, it's possible that Morgan bred them to be only white-legged. It is possible. However, when you consider the fact that he bred in the Newbold Ginger blood, which, if it's the same as your common red quill of today, should have been green-legged. Well, green leg, as I've talked about before, is a modified yellow leg. And that would have reintroduced that yellow leg trait back into him if he had bred it out. Now, I used to know when Morgan died. I don't right now, off the top of my head. But it's interesting to note that there was an article written by E.T. Piper, used the pen name of Full Drop, back in 1943 concerning the Morgan Whitehackle. And I quoted that article to the man that was posting. And under the description of the birds, it said that, first of all, for a line that was bred for so long by one man, there was, quote, an unusually high lack of uniformity. Now, what he meant by this is, he goes on to say there's about 3 different body types that you can expect out of a family of Morgans. And I've seen, I believe, all 3 body types. And I'm not saying just in my own fowl, but looking at Morgans over the years that I've been looking into them. You've got really robust, thick ones, strong birds. You've got an in-between, and you've got a really lanky bird. Those are your 3 types. Now, the next thing he says, cocks are duckwing red and spangle. But they'll also produce brassy back, ginger, what some guys call Greek fire, and he also mentions pyles. Now, my belief is that the pyles were either extremely spangled birds, or that the pyles were bred out a long time ago, or were absorbed into other lines of pyles, or what have you. Now, the interesting next thing he says is the hens, wheaten or partridge, and yellow or white-legged, but some matings will produce a percentage of dark-legged pullets, which, of course, is a throwback to that ginger blood, or if it's not the ginger blood, the brown-red blood that originally was in the North Britons. But the chances are it's more likely the ginger blood, because it was a more recent cross, you see. And they'll say, well, how come it was only the pullets? Well, that modifier gene can be carried by a broodcock and not show it, and it'll transfer to his daughters and show up in his daughters, but when it transfers to his sons, you're not going to see it. So that's why. And chances are, I would reckon that most of the folks who bred Whitehackles of the Morgan variety that did get dark-legged birds out of them probably started calling them hatch. That's just my theory. I have nothing to back that up other than hatch became kind of a hot ticket name, and hatch birds are generally considered, traditionally anyways, to be dark-legged reds. So they probably figured I'm going to have better luck selling them as hatch than to go into explaining why I have dark-legged Whitehackles. Now here's one other little bit that I wanted to throw in there too, because the man mentioned red eyes, and I know red eyes is a huge thing. A lot of folks consider it a sign of health. Now to me, the sign of health that I'm looking for is that you want bright, clear, healthy, shiny eyes. But his article says, and again, keep in mind, this is 1943. Morgans come red-eyed, orange-eyed, and dew-eyed. So dew-eyed is that pale eye. I've heard of some people call it a gander eye, if you're familiar with geese. So, again, goes back to saying about that lack of uniformity within the bloodline. And the one part, which I'm sure they didn't bother to mention just because they dub, and we still dub today, is the earlobes. Now, I've had people complain to me in the past, number one, that my birds are yellow-legged, and number two, that there's a good number of them that'll get white in the earlobes or have solid white earlobes. Now, I'll save where I think white earlobes comes from for another video, but I will say this. It wouldn't doubt me, given the lack of uniformity in the bloodline, even when Morgan himself had them, that some of them had white earlobes. That's just my theory. But anyhow, I hope that gives you all something interesting to ponder. And just keep in mind, I mean, none of us were there. And even if we were, what are the chances that we would have got the whole story from the guy who was breeding them back then anyway? Thomas Murphy, for example, notoriously secretive about how he raised and bred his birds. To me, the history is a big part of the fun of these birds. It gives me something to research and connect the dots on those cold winter nights when I'm sitting in the house and, don't feel like working on other projects. But anyhow, I hope you all are having better luck with your breeding season than we are. We wish you all the best, and thanks for watching.